Good afternoon, friends. I'm George Latimer, Westchester County Executive, and I'm pleased to be here at the Rye Brook Village Hall to announce our year-end results of our efforts to try to reduce the number of bridge strikes on the Hutchinson River Parkway, primarily going northbound as it approaches the King Street Bridge, which is just a few hundred feet from where we stand. I'm joined by a host of people. A few of them are going to have a chance to speak with you, but we're here as the guests of the mayor of Rye Brook Village, Paul Rosenberg, who's with us, and the village manager or village administrator, Chris Bradbury, is here as well. We also have the chief of police of Rye Brook, Greg Austin, is with us, and we're very appreciative of their work locally, and the mayor will have a chance to speak in a few seconds. At the state level of government, our partner and friend, State Senator Shelley Mayer, is with us. She went out of her way to be available to be here today, and Shelley and Steve Otis, state assemblyman, who was unable to be here today, are both key elements in trying to help us get the state resources we needed to help make some of the things we've been able to do possible. We also have a representative here from the office of Assemblyman David Buchwald, who's the next door district and very helpful in all of this process. From the county level of government, our local county legislator is Nancy Barr, and she and I both talked about this issue very early on in her tenure. She is a resident of Rye Brook, and I'm a next-door resident in Rye City. And during my prior legislative tenure, this was a significant issue. And so we tried to talk through different strategies and try to figure out how do we get all of these levels of government to coordinate. We're joined as well by Gary Zuckerman, who's the town supervisor of the town of Rye. And he, too, has been a strong advocate for us to make a lot of these improvements. And with us also are individuals, officers from our Westchester County Department of Public Safety. They're under the leadership of Commissioner Sheriff Tom Gleason, and we're very happy to have these gentlemen with us today. They police the Hutchinson River Parkway, and so whenever there's a bridge strike accident, Chief Austin and Commissioner Sheriff Gleason have to allocate resources out there to back up a truck, unload a truck, God knows what's in the truck that might be all over the roadway, and deal with a tremendous backup of traffic that could go, all the way back to 287 or to Mamaroneck Avenue, depending on how serious the incident was. Very briefly, and then we'll have each of these other people speak. We've known for a long time that the King Street Bridge, which divides New York and Connecticut, has the dubious title of being the #1 most struck bridge in New York State by various vehicles. And that's one of the few designations of we're #1 that we really don't want to have. It represents the potential loss of life and certainly the loss of property. On any given day, it could be a serious problem for the people who live in and around this bridge area. When we did our press conference to announce some of these improvements, we were on the lawn of one of the individuals nearby, and not knowing what a truck is carrying, not knowing if the bridge strike comes in the middle of the night, there may be a need to evacuate people. There certainly could be multiple other vehicles affected by a bridge strike if the truck hits the bridge and somebody's behind them and can't stop on time. And these gentlemen of law enforcement are called upon at all hours to potentially deal with this. And there is a cost factor in doing that. The police officers and the fire departments in Rye Brook, the police officers in Westchester County, when deployed here to deal with a bridge strike, are not available to do other elements of policing, or in the case of the village fire services as well. And that creates a spillover effect of cost and of loss of coverage, which can always happen when these things occur. This particular bridge has been the most struck bridge, we think, because of the road structure of this area. We are a gateway between New York, the Midwest, and the South, and New England. And this road, the Hutchinson River Parkway, which is a state-owned road but is policed by the county police, is parallel to the New England Thruway. Those of us who live here know that. The New England Thruway is an interstate highway with all of the interstate highway clearances, and I might also add the weight-bearing load so that major trucks can be accommodated on the New England Thruway. But if you look at a map from a very simple way, whether it's a map or GPS, without knowing it, you see two parallel lines of limited access highways a few miles apart, the Hutchinson River, then the Merritt Parkway, and the New England Thruway. And since it's a gateway area, almost every single one of the trucks that struck this bridge were from out-of-state drivers, and not New Jersey drivers or Connecticut drivers who know the nature of the road system, but drivers that are coming in from the South or the Midwest who are not familiar with what a parkway is and how it differs from an interstate highway. And for those who don't need the whole history, but I guess I'll give it to you anyway since we're all here, when Robert Moses laid out a game plan for parkways, which you'll see on Long Island with the Northern State and the Southern State Parkway, the Palisades Parkway that goes from New Jersey into Connecticut, New Jersey into New York, the Hutchinson River Parkway, the Sawmill, and the Bronx River Parkway, which now the county owns. All of these parkways were built at a period of time before there was routine interstate highways. Those came along in the 1950s. The parkways came along in the 1920s, I guess in some cases the 1930s. So the bridge clearances were structured for what the vehicles of that day were. And as you can see, they're beautifully constructed bridges. They're magnificent pieces of architecture that are 100 years old, not designed for modern interstate trucking. So when we have a truck get on the Hutchinson River Parkway, particularly we believe at two major entrances in the northbound, when they get on at Mamaroneck Avenue, which is a connector between the New England Thruway and the Hutch. If you're shifting off of the New England Thruway, Mamaroneck Avenue is one of the places to do it. And the next most convenient area is I-287 and Westchester Avenue, which serves as an access road. If you are a trucker from out of state, you're driving north into New England, and you see that there's any kind of traffic or accident on the New England Thruway, unless you have a commercial GPS, or if you're just looking at some map that doesn't differentiate, the Hutchison-Merritt combination looks like a viable alternative. Mamaroneck Avenue gets you to that alternative, so does I-287. And then for those of us who've driven these roadways, when you get on at Mamaroneck Avenue, as you go north, the North Street Bridge in Harrison is a relatively new bridge, and you can clear under it. The next bridge after that is the I-287 overpass. You can clear under it. And if you get on at I-287, you go north and you go over Purchase Street, you go over Lincoln Avenue, you go under the new North Ridge Street Bridge, which was created a few years ago, and you slam right into the King Street Bridge as the first bridge that you cannot clear with an interstate truck. Some folks have said, why don't you just raise the bridge? And so you'd avoid the accidents. At least you'd avoid it here. Well, this is the borderline between New York and Connecticut. And in fact, Connecticut co-owns the bridge with New York and has been reticent, I'll put it nicely, to agree to any plan to raise the bridge. Because if we raise the bridge here, the very next bridge in Connecticut can't be cleared either. And Connecticut would be accepting the problem that currently is at our doorstep if we raise this one bridge. You'd have to go up the Merritt and raise, a significant number of other bridges. And we think one of the problems, and I'll defer to the experts of traffic behind us, is that more and more drivers these days rely almost slavishly on GPS systems, generically, whatever the local system, the specific system they have might be. And in the GPS system that is not designed for commercial traffic, bridge clearance heights are not identified. And, you can just imagine somebody who's driving on a 500, 600, 700-mile trip. They've gone through states that don't have parkways like this, don't have low clearances. And they get off the New England Thruway. They think they're as clear as a bell. They go 2 or 3 exits, no problem, and they slam into this bridge. Now, there has been signage at this bridge previously, basic signage that, unfortunately, in this day and age when people are following the GPS, they're waiting for that little voice to say, in 1/4 mile, make a right turn. You don't know where you are. You don't know what the right turn looks like. You're just listening to the little voice that's telling you what to do. And if that little voice doesn't say, there's a clearance bridge of 9 feet ahead, you go slamming into that bridge with your 12-foot, 11-foot truck. So understanding that problem, we turned to the state of New York. We asked for their help. New York State Department of Transportation, Assemblyman Steve Otis and Senator Shelley Mayer went to bat for us to try to get some additional money and the authority for us to put up additional signage in a number of different places. The village and the town were strong advocates, Dancy Barr, strong advocates for all of these things. The new signage that has gone up in and around the I-287 interchange and then all the way up the line, and you'll see it out there. We also have we put up electronic, the state put up electronic message boards. They're officially known as variable message signs. And they convey information in lighted, yellow print against a black backdrop, which is much more visible than the standard sign at night, which you may not see, even though it has reflective looking on, and it says, low bridges ahead, trucks exit now, all trucks, buses, RVs must exit. Trucks stay on I-287, low bridge on exit 9N, and it goes on and on. All these different types of elements, including what you're seeing now in this picture, which was just recently taken, that highlights more specifically to catch the eye of the driver what the clearance numbers are at these locations. And with all of this, this is a hopeful effort to see if we can make an improvement. So we're happy to report that with year-end 2019 statistics in, we had a total of 8 bridge strikes at King Street Bridge. That compares to 24 bridge strikes a year ago, and double-digit bridge strikes that have occurred in the years prior to that. Now, 1 year does not assure us of a trend. We think we're heading in the right direction, but we're going to monitor this, obviously, as we go forward. And the one thing that we've done through the Department of Public Safety in the county is we've analyzed every bridge strike, talked to every driver who hit a bridge to identify where they were, what they used for information, and so forth. We still believe that the single biggest thing we need is a change in the GPS system. There is a commercial GPS product out there that a trucker can use. It's not mandated by law. It's not mandated by insurance. And we would hope that from the state or the federal legislative level, they would look at that issue and determine if it's necessary to do that. But keep in mind that our state government does not control licensing truckers from other states. So most likely, if something like this is going to happen, it's going to happen on a nationwide basis if it's legislative or regulatory, or from an industry standpoint, or it'll have to happen through the insurance industry, which pays off on a damaged truck. And it would be up to them to determine that in the future, when they write a policy for a truck, that they would have to show, the driver would have to show that they have a commercial GPS, which would alert them to this. Absent that, we think, without knowing necessarily how it works, that all GPS systems should include that information. And as one of my friends in law enforcement just said a few minutes ago, they'll tell you when there's a police car about a mile away. So why can't they tell you when there's a clearance problem a mile away? All of those things would be necessary. But we have not had universal success all across our system. Parkways. There have been other bridges that have had a slight increase in bridge strikes, but those bridges haven't gotten the extra treatment that we gave King Street because King Street was so far ahead of bridge strikes than every other one. So what we hope we're seeing, in addition to an improvement in King Street with some of these actions, is that now we can look at on the Hutch, East Lincoln Avenue and Mount Vernon northbound, Mamaroneck Road on the Hutch southbound. There's a bridge in Pleasantville. I'm not sure if it's Bedford Road or Grant Street, but there's a bridge on the Sawmill that gets struck, and we've seen a few others. And to see now if we can, again, with the state and with county resources, we can add the same type of additional elements. The variable messaging signs are not cheap. And when you deploy it permanently at a particular location, we're not sure that just because we have it there for 6 months, that in the 7th month, if we reallocated it someplace else, that we wouldn't have the bridge strikes again. So these are cost factors that are significant. But the good news is that we had a good year in this. And I said at the time we started on this, there's so many problems that governments face that we face as a society. We deal with an opioid crisis. How do we solve that problem? We deal with problems of homeless housing. There's so many problems that seem intractable. If we can't solve a problem like this in government, then there is no problem that we can solve. This is simple and it's proximate. The drivers do not want to hit the bridge. For whatever their faults may be, there is no intent to destroy their vehicle, lose their payload, get fired, and possibly injure themselves seriously. So it is a question of figuring out how to convey information to the driver that they will see and react to, and it appears we've had some success doing that. With that in mind, I want to turn to some of my other colleagues so that they can share their thoughts about this. The mayor of the village of Rye Brook, Paul Rosenberg, not only sat as mayor, sat as trustee prior to that. He lives in the area. Many of the nights they hear the big boom, and the big boom is a truck hitting that bridge. So, Mr. Mayor, hopefully this is the sign of something better. Thank you again for housing us, and please share your thoughts.
Thank you, George. You talk about local governments working together, and this is a perfect example. We have village, we have state, we have county executive branch, we have county legislative branch, we have the town here. And this is what can happen when all of the governments work together. Here we had a bridge where, as county executive so correctly put it, we had out-of-state truckers hitting this bridge on a regular basis. Going from 24 a year to a month, it was just an insane use of resources, both on the village level and the county level, to have to clean this up. I remember one afternoon a couple of years ago, a truck hit that bridge. It was full of butter. Seriously, it was full of butter. It sheared the top off the truck, which is very frequently what happens. The butter caught on fire. The fire went into the butter melted as it was on fire. The fire went into the storm drains in Connecticut. It sounds funny, but it really created quite a problem. So, we just want to say thank you to all of the different levels of representation here. Senator Meyer and Steve, I know Steve Otis couldn't be here, unfortunately. Thank you for helping to fund this, because as the county executive mentioned, the variable message signs are not cheap, but they are very, very visible. Before, there was really just one or maybe two. Now you have a permanent one where 684 and the Hutch split, and you have multiple multivariable signs along the way between the King Street Bridge and down on Purchase Street. So you really, really can see all of the warnings as you're coming up. And then the bridge itself is, not only does it have the two red signs depicting what the maximum height is, but the bridge is lit on both sides at night. And again, these are changes that were not cheap, but we seriously appreciate all of the effort that was put into this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. County Legislator Nancy Barr.
Thank you. I'd also like to, thank our state representatives, Shelley Mayer and Steve Otis, as well as the county executive, and our representatives here in Rye Brook and Rye Town. This, as somebody who drove my kids to school many a day, there were many times when we could not get our children to school on time because even though it was only one exit up the Hutch, we'd be stuck behind some big traffic jam that involved a truck that had gotten stuck. And the same story, of course, was true for people going to work and just trying to go about their daily business. So it was a huge inconvenience to have this happening on a regular basis. And it's very exciting that it has been reduced by so much. But I will say my colleagues on the board are all jealous. They all want the same kind of treatment in their districts. They all have their own problems of this nature. And one thing that we plan to do as a legislature this year is to lobby for the GPS changes that the county executive was talking about. I know that he and his staff worked on that last year, but we are going to be working on that this year to see if we can't get some changes made to the GPS systems so that we can reduce this down maybe to zero. So again, thank you everybody so much for all of your help on this, and it is very exciting to actually have made a difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Next, Senator Shelley Mayer.
Thank you, George. And first, I do want to give a lot of credit to County Executive Latimer. He took this, as he said, a solvable problem, and he basically said, everybody get in the room and figure out a solution. And by doing that, and at the last press conference, we had the state commissioner of transportation, which made a commitment to making this work, in part due to George and other players urging. We can find the money for modest changes that impact the lives of people if we sit in a room together and figure out a common solution. So I want to give you credit, George, for taking the lead, to all of our partners at the municipal and particularly the law enforcement side of things. This has been, a remarkably difficult problem to solve, and it shouldn't have been. With George's leadership and with the commitment of the state and the Department of Transportation and our commitment as elected officials, Steve Otis and myself, to make sure that we put the resources where they're needed, I think we can solve the problems. We are looking at the GPS legislation. There are issues with interstate commerce that make it a more complex issue than it ought to be, but that's the way it goes. So we will be working hard to try to push towards commercial GPS in trucks that are driven in New York to the extent that we can regulate it, and we'll be working with the county and the county board to see what we can do. It may take a federal push, but again, if we work together, these are solutions that are achievable. So thank you, George, for your leadership. And I want to acknowledge Vidat Gashi was here. Oh, I'm sorry, I got ahead of you, George. by our colleague from the County Board of Legislature and adjoining district, County Legislator Vedat Gashi.
Thank you, Shelley. In addition to introducing Vedat, he is one of those legislators that Nancy mentioned. He's already picked out the part of the sawmill that goes through his district that needs the same treatment. As was mentioned by Senator Mayer, U.S. Senator Chuck Schumer of New York has crafted a letter signed by 2 other senators from neighboring states that are urging Google and other GPS navigation system providers to add information about commercial vehicle restrictions to all phone apps, especially those that are free to the public. We really thank them for that push. We made an effort to try to do it from the perspective of a county. We recognize the county government. I know sometimes you feel this way as a village. The county government is a small player when we're talking about national companies and international companies. But we think that United States senators help change the dialogue a little bit, and if those changes can come in an approximate period of time, it will help. The brave men and women of law enforcement are the ones that are on the firing lines. EMS and the fire departments, they're on the firing lines. When these things hit, all of this other rhetoric goes down the drain, and they have to go out and save life, save property, clear a roadway. Very difficult tasks to do, expensive tasks to do, and potentially dangerous. We had one of our county police officers struck when his responsibility was to help shut down the Sawmill River Parkway over the weekend. Thankfully, Officer Green was not seriously injured or fatally, in a life-threatening situation, but he was seriously injured. And every time you're out, patrolling the highways, you put yourself out on the line. And in situations like this, anything can happen. And so we really want to try to reduce that potential for lots of reasons, and one of which is to protect the lives of our law enforcement professionals who are out there. So we appreciate it. With all of that, we'll open it up to any questions that you have. I'm happy to answer any directly. I'm happy to channel them to any of the other folks here, and then we'll thank you for your time. Let me give hometown privilege to our friends at Westmore News if they have any questions.
No, I can't think of anything.
We're good. Okay.
This is sort of like deja vu.
Hopefully a good deja vu. Yes.
I have a question for you. This new technology was not put into place until about the fall of last year. So what do you attribute the decrease to year over year?
Well, the variable signs were the last piece to come into place. Other parts of the signage were put into place earlier in the year. So, there's always a sort of a restraining factor when you look at numbers, when you compare year over year, because you really do need a 2, 3, 4 year comparison to make sure that it's a permanent direction and trend. And I remarked that in some of our private conversations. We do want to see a second year and a third year to make sure that what we're highlighting today is in fact the new normal, as opposed to just a fortuitous reduction that might happen happenstantially. But some of the signage improvements happened really right after we started to work on this, and you would have seen it in approach signs on Mamaroneck Avenue before you got onto the Hutchinson River Parkway. You would have seen it in I-287. The variable message signs are probably the most prominent piece of this, and the lighting of the bridge is probably the next most prominent piece of this, and they were sequenced at different times as we had them. So we may have been beneficiary of a certain amount of good luck, which we'll take. But I think the combination of things have certainly helped us. And what we did not see is like a very low number early in the year, then somehow it rose. It stayed consistently low the year. There have been no strikes for the first 3 weeks of this month. Obviously, January is not the busiest month for interstate trucking, so that could be a factor. But we think at this stage of the game, we're hopeful that this is in fact a reliable trend.
Some people might be wondering, if you look at the stats, there have been a number of strikes since this detection system was put into place. So is it really working?
Well, I think you have to remember that the individual that's driving the vehicle still has to respond to information that they receive. And it is possible that they could get information and it still doesn't, it doesn't reach them as they're thinking about what they're doing, and so that's why they still hit the bridge. As I said before, and I think it's indisputable that no one intends to hit the bridge. And when we've done these interviews with the folks after the fact, they would say, I didn't see the sign. Previously, I didn't see the sign. I didn't realize that it was, there was low bridges on a parkway. So what will happen is, you'll have, as the state has put in these laser detection pieces, and it flashes a sign, overheight vehicle, pull off. So without that system in place, 4 or 5 vehicles go right through. With the system in place, 1, 2 get stopped and pulled over. Anecdotally, because this is the area of the county that I live in, I travel the Hutch just about every day of my life, I've seen trucks pulled off to the side of the road before they hit the bridge. And I'm sure if we ask the chief or those who are on the patrol, they will say that maybe the difference is that a truck got on the hutch and didn't hit the bridge, but might have. They didn't catch the idea that they shouldn't be on it, but they didn't hit the bridge and they were able to be backed off. So it's less bridge strikes. Doesn't necessarily mean that people understand fully that they shouldn't be on the hutch at all, or for that matter, the other roadways too.
I saw a case where a driver was pulled over on the side of the road as well, thinking, how do I get out of this?
Right.
But there were a handful of strikes during the month of December. Is that concerning to you, knowing that this new technology was put into place?
Well, I've just said, I don't think any technology will be perfect. There will continue to be bridge strikes because it depends on how the person takes the warning. And, some folks will take the warning seriously. Some folks will miss the warning. The most important thing is not do you have 100% response, because you won't have 100% response. We know there will be bridge strikes this year. The question is, can you reduce them dramatically? And when you look at the overall result, a drop from, if this was 24 to 21, there's no necessary parade to be held. But when you go from 24 to 8, that's a significant improvement. The fact that the system is in place and some drivers still miss it doesn't calculate how many saw it and got off. And so there wasn't an incident where there might have been an incident. So the only incidents we see are the ones who, with this additional information, that still missed it and still went ahead. And that is why we argue for the GPS piece, because it's subjective, but I sense that once the GPS systems are in place, that whatever it is the driver is paying attention to, not looking at the signage, they are watching the GPS. And the GPS, if it can speak to them and show that there's a problem up ahead, then I think we'll get closer to 100% compliance. But we don't have that piece in. So I don't doubt that there will be bridge strikes. I'm just hopeful that what we're seeing is less of them in a significant way.
This, of course, has been a long time concern for people who live near this bridge. For people who live near other bridges, problem bridges in Westchester County, anything being done to help improve those numbers as well?
Well, as I said, humorously but seriously, other legislators now want to see us try to put the same systems in place at some of those other bridges. I referenced a couple of them: Mamaroneck Road Bridge southbound, East Lincoln Bridge northbound on the Hutch. Those are two prominent ones. There are a couple on the Bronx River Parkway. The first bridge, I think it's the Palmer Road Bridge. I have to go back and look at my maps in my head. But that's the bridges that are most proximate to a major roadway that you would be moving out of to get onto one of the parkways is most likely the bridges that are most likely struck. So yes, we would look at trying to put as much of these things in place as possible. The VMS signs are expensive, and we could sit down and probably make a list of 30 places that they should be in the county. Those resources are not available for us to do all of it. But what I would say to anybody who is asking me, what about us? We tested it out here. We think we have positive results, and we're going to try to replicate it in as many places as we can. And if it continues, the numbers continue to hold, that we have a dramatic reduction. If we can see a reduction in some of the other bridges, then we know we've got the best possible answer until we get the GPS system. Other questions from any of our friends in the media? And you're welcome to do any one-on-one interviews with any of these folks here to get some of their reactions as well. Anything that would be helpful to you. With that, thank you very much. We appreciate it, Paul. Thank you for your hospitality.
Thank you, George.